The United States has already tested some of its most controversial wartime capacity in a series of amphibious landings, the first such assaults on the Aleutian Islands since the Japanese were driven out in the Second World War. At the outer edge of the Aleutians, the island of Shimia, in the group closest to Soviet territory, was the site of a recent marine landing. 2,000 Marines came ashore, backed up by 12,000 sailors, 115 aircraft, and an aircraft carrier-led battle group. Because the Soviet Union is so close, military strategists, both in Moscow and in Washington, are in agreement that the new strategy has but one aim: to demonstrate to the Soviet Union that any aggression against Western Europe will be met with the prospect of an invasion of Soviet soil itself in the Pacific.
Isn't the message that the Soviets would draw from those operations that if Marines are landing on the island of Shimia, then Marines could directly threaten the Soviet Union itself in time of war, that they could land on Soviet soil?
I certainly hope that that message is loud and clear, because I think it's a fact.
Is it now part of the new strategy that should a conflict develop in Europe, for example, that the United States would be prepared in the event of that emergency to land military forces in Vladivostok, the Kamchatka Peninsula, that sort of area?
We don't want to transmit the specifics of what we could do, but that certainly is a capability. And I would say, as particularly as a member of the JCS and also in my experience as Commandant of the Marine Corps, we want to keep the Soviet Union guessing as to just what our intentions are. We don't want to have a fixed blueprint that we advertise. So the more we can complicate the calculus of their decision-making process, the better off we are. So let me say, absolutely, we have the capability of landing a very significant force in an amphibious operation against anywhere that, of course, that you can land on the coastline of the Soviet Union in the Pacific. So it gives us a very significant capability.
How do you answer the charge which has been made that those sort of actions specifically and the whole maritime strategy in general is a provocation to the Soviet Union?
I answer that by saying that I hope it is.
Carrying the fight to the Soviet Union means being prepared to fight in one of the world's most impossible climates, an area where the military admit there are only two seasons, this winter and next winter.
This is now typical Aleutian weather. The wind is gusting up to 70 miles an hour. The rain is coming in horizontally. It's a measure of the Pentagon's commitment to the defense of Alaska, that they're prepared to spend so much money, time, and effort on the defense of an area which is so hostile.
In fact, within 45 minutes, the winds began to hit 100 miles an hour, strength where standing up is impossible, never mind military action. But the Pentagon is now building up a string of North Pacific bases, creating a new Army Light Division based in Alaska, which can go anywhere in the world, and increasing the tempo of military exercises. As Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger put it, offensive moves against the Soviet flanks will force them to divert resources from Central Europe.
It is inherent in naval forces that they have the ability to move rapidly, concentrate forces, marine amphibious assault, heavy airstrikes, shore bombardment, seize key choke points, and establish major military moves far from where the enemy might like it to happen. We want them to see that we're not bluffing, that in wartime we are going to be there and we are training to win.
All this may seem a strange paradox. While the superpower diplomats meet to discuss arms reduction in Europe, in the one area where their troops meet eyeball to eyeball, without the deterrent of a civilian population, there would seem to be an arms race. The most obvious result of the new strategy is that the Aleutian chain of islands have become almost like a 1,500-mile-long American military base. Adak at the center of the chain, precisely equidistant from both Japan and the United States west coast, has become the pivot on which much of the strategy rests. The Pentagon allowed us to become the first journalists to film on the base, though many areas remained classified. Adak used to be a military backwater, a virtually treeless island in an earthquake zone where the main pleasure was leaving. Now it is said to be in the military fast lane.
Adak is the northernmost nuclear storage site that the United States operates in the Pacific. We store nuclear depth bombs at Adak, and Adak would become the center of U.S. anti-submarine warfare operations in this entire region. If the U.S. and the Soviet Union went to war, ADAC would not only become the center for the aircraft flights and for the nuclear depth bombs themselves, but would be the center for naval intelligence collection in the region.
The most visible of ADAC's secrets from the outside looks remarkably dull, a P-3 Orion reconnaissance plane. But it's what's on the inside that counts. The P-3s are old-fashioned aircraft capable of patrolling the North Pacific for hours on end as they track the Soviet submarine fleet. Their highly sophisticated computers process data from listening devices dropped in the sea. They also link up with an array of permanent underwater listening devices known as SOSUS. The overall strategic aim is to be capable in time of war of sinking the Soviet Pacific submarine fleet before it can fire its nuclear missiles. In that event, the P-3s could carry nuclear depth charges presently stored at ADAC. Critics of the new maritime strategy believe the result of all these policies is to leave the Soviet Union more nervous in the Pacific than anywhere else in the world. Supporters say they simply want to shoot the Soviet archer before he releases his arrow.
If a conflict should break out between the United States and the Soviet Union, God forbid, is our intent to stop that conflict as soon as possible and to cease hostilities at the lowest level of damage? Or is our intent to destroy the Soviet state? If we're going to be running around with amphibious invasions on Sakhalin Island and the Kurils on Kamchatka Peninsula and in the Sea of Japan, if we're going to be bombing Soviet land bases with Tomahawk sea-launched cruise missiles and aircraft carriers, and if we're going to be sinking Soviet strategic submarines, all of which we're practicing on a regular basis now, it seems to me that we're signaling to the Soviet Union that our intent is to destroy the Soviet state.
We are a defensive alliance. And to say that the Navy, by having an offensive strategy to defend Europe, is provocative, is really putting the logic of the Mad Hatter into the equation. Because in the event of war, despite the kind of myopic way that Europeans look at a NATO war, it cannot be limited to the NATO theater. It will instantaneously, as far as the navies of the world are concerned, be global. And the United States interests in the Pacific will immediately engage forces on both sides in the Pacific theater. And frankly, there will be some arguing in the United States that there will be more at stake in the Pacific even than in the Atlantic.
The tranquility is deceptive. In the air, on land, on the sea, and under it, the military forces in the North Pacific are growing. 14% of Alaska's workforce is now military personnel. Nearly $2,000 million of defense money came to the state last year. The most sophisticated intelligence and early warning stations anywhere in the world are already here or are to be built. On one base, a remote speck of rock 1,500 miles out to sea, they have a motto. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here.
And the Aleutians are a theatre for a high-technology contest of eavesdropping and countermeasures as America listens in on Soviet missile tests in the North Pacific. New facilities being developed by America are crucial to the development of the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars. The U.S. is upgrading its intelligence facilities throughout Alaska, including construction on the Aleutians of a revolutionary system. With a completion date of October 1988, it's a massive new radar. The plan is to build what's called a relocatable over-the-horizon radar, capable, unlike ordinary systems, of bouncing signals off the upper atmosphere to see almost 4,000 kilometers towards the Soviet Union, despite the curvature of the air. And along with a recently finished runway, the new radar is just phase 1 of America's planned expansion here.